Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Ram Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajakacarya Saraswata Shishimate Isi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Prem Sakho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasti Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Radha Kudashyava Kunta Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai Shri Shri Gauranitai Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. Welcome to today's class in Srimad Bhagavatam. We're going to continue reading that you did throughout these days from Canto 4, Chapter 25, which is entitled The Characteristics of King Puranjana. And we are reading text 31 today. Tvadananam suvrusuttaralochanam Tvadananam suvrusuttaralochanam Yalam vinilala vrinda samvritam Vyalam vinilala vrinda samvritam Uniyame darshaya valguvachakam Uniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bimukam shuchismite Yadvridayana bimukam shuchismite Tvadananam suvrusuttaralochanam Vyadam vinilala vrinda samvritam Uniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bimukam shuchismite Please, if you can read.
Tvadananam suvrusuttaralochanam
Tvadananam suvrusuttaralochanam Yalam vinilala vrinda samvritam Uniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana vimukam shuchismite Tvadananam suvrusuttaralochanam Vyalam vinilala vrinda samvritam Uniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bimukam shuchismite Tvadananam suvrusuttaralochanam Vyalam vinilala vrinda samvritam Uniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bimukam shuchismite. Okay. So reading word by word. Tvat, your. Ananam, face. Subru, having nice eyebrows. Sutara, with nice pupils. Lochanam,
Lochanam,
eyes,
eyes,
Vyalambi,
Vyalambi,
scattered,
scattered,
Nila,
Nila,
bluish,
bluish,
Alakavrinda,
Alakavinda,
by locks of hair, Samvritam,
Samvita,
surrounded,
surrounded,
Unya,
Unya,
having raised,
having raised,
me, me,
me,
unto me, Darshaya,
Darshaya,
show,
show,
Valguvachakam,
Valguvachakam,
having words very sweet to hear,
having words very sweet to hear,
Yat,
Yat,
which face,
which face,
Vridaya,
Vridaya,
by shyness,
by shyness,
Na,
Na,
not,
not,
Abhimukam,
Abhimuktam,
face to face,
face to face,
Shuchismite,
Shuchismite,
a woman with lovely smiles.
woman with lovely smiles.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. My dear girl, your face is so beautiful with your nice eyebrows and eyes and with your bluish hair scattered about. In addition, very sweet sounds are coming from your mouth. Nonetheless, you are so covered with shyness that you do not see me face to face. I therefore request you, my dear girl, to smile and kindly raise your head to see me. When I was reading commentaries on this verse, it is interesting to just note that this bluish hair actually means very dark, like very black. I don't know why they say bluish, but it means like that. So, purport. Such a speech is typical of a loving entity attracted by the opposite sex. This is called bewilderment occasioned by becoming conditioned by material nature. When thus attracted by the beauty of the material energy, one becomes very eager to enjoy. This is elaborately described in this instance of Puranjanas becoming attracted by the beautiful woman. In conditional life, the living entity is attracted by face, eyebrows or eyes, a voice or anything. In short, everything becomes attractive. When a man or a woman is attracted by the opposite sex, it does not matter whether the opposite sex is beautiful or not. The lover sees everything beautiful in the face of the beloved and thus becomes attracted. This attraction causes the living entity to fall down in this material world. This is described in the Bhagavad Gita. Ichadvesha samutena dvandvamohena bharata sarva bhutani samoham sargayanti parantapa. Ostayan of Bharata, Arjuna, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. This condition of life is called avidya. Opposed to this avidya is real knowledge. Shisha Upanishad distinguishes between vidya and avidya, knowledge and ignorance. By avidya, ignorance, one becomes conditioned, and by vidya, knowledge, one becomes liberated. Puranjana admits herein that he is attracted by avidya. Now he wishes to see the complete feature of avidya, and so requests the girl to raise her head so that he can see her face to face. He thus wishes to see the various features that make avidya attractive. So, verse again. So, my dear girl, your face is so beautiful, with your nice eyebrows and eyes, and with your bluish hair scattered about. In addition, very sweet sounds are coming from your mouth. Nonetheless, you are so covered with shyness that you do not see me face to face. I therefore request you, my dear girl, to smile and kindly raise your head to see me. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, so we have half an hour to speak a little bit about King Puranjana. And you all know that the whole story of King Puranjana is actually an allegory to a living entity who is conditioned in this body. So basically, I always forget the king's name. If someone knows, he or she can tell me. So Narada Muni is speaking to which king? This story of King Puranjana. Pari Prachini Shalva. Do you know? Ma Krishna? Do you know to which king? Yeah. So I'm not good with names. So he's speaking this story to him because the king is actually, he wants to perform certain fruitive activities according to the advice actually of his brahmanas. And I mean, he wants to enjoy in a pious way. But Narada Muni, he wants auspiciousness for the king. And therefore he wants to give him this transcendental knowledge that will actually give him the highest benefit and it will make him very, very happy. So therefore, he talks about this King Puranjana, who actually represents a living entity who is encaged in this body. And by various ways, Narada Muni describes how living entity actually is attracted with a woman who is actually a metaphor for intelligence. And this intelligence is surrounded by 10 followers who are actually the senses and the objects of the senses. And there's a mind here. So this whole story is actually an allegory of how a living entity becomes conditioned in this material world. And this story actually applies to all of us. So Damodar Prasad, I was listening to his lecture, so he said that, and it is written also in Srimad Bhagavatam, how we are all actually Puranjana, because we are all encaged in these bodies, and there are very rarely persons who are not. For example, I don't know, Prahlad Maharaj was in the womb of his mother, and therefore when he took birth, he already was a devotee of the Lord. Or Shukadeva Goswami, he was also considered to be a liberated person who didn't want to step outside the womb of his mother. So I forgot how many years he was actually in the womb of his mother, not wanting to come out. So these examples are very rare. Like 99% of the world is King Puranjana. And we came to this material world because we wanted to enjoy, and in that sense we were rebellious to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very kind and very merciful, and he gives us a free will, so therefore he fulfills all the desires that we want actually. And that's why that is one of the reasons why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that everyone follows his path, whatever he does, because everyone acts according to either 3 modes of nature or according to his wishes, but the actions of the 3 modes of nature are actually according to his wishes. So basically everyone indirectly acts according to how Krishna imagined this whole material world. But when Lord Brahma creates this material world, he has to put all the living entities into ignorance, because if we were not put into ignorance, we could not tolerate being here, because the constitutional position of the spirit soul is that he's Jiveras Sarupa Hoy Krishnera. I forgot it. Or I wrote it actually, so I don't forget it. The thing with notes, and my experience with my notes, is that I cannot find where I wrote anything, but anyway, it's a quote from Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it says that actually the constitutional position of the spirit soul is that he's the eternal servant of Krishna. And to be an eternal servant of Krishna means that we have love for Krishna. And if we have love for someone, that means that we are very much attached to this person, in this case Krishna. So therefore, if we are so attached and if we have this love in pure ecstasy, we cannot live a moment without this person. So therefore, if we are not put into avidya, we cannot be in this material world. We just want to live in a way. And that's why it is said that when the soul actually reaches the goal of pure prema, in pure ecstasy, is like in the highest ecstasy, if he experiences it, he will leave his body, because the ecstasy is so powerful that the living entity cannot stay here. It has to go back to the spiritual world. So in order for us to be here and to have our wishes fulfilled, we are put into ignorance. And this ignorance is represented here by this girl and by her face. So basically, King Puranjana, he wants to seduce this lady because he wants to become her husband. And so in this allegory, many things are described. In a way, this is a relationship between the soul and the intelligence in this allegory, but also what it describes is this attraction, the basis of anything that is happening in this material world is the sex attraction. So everything happens because of the sex attraction, because this is the highest pleasure that one can achieve. And this does not only include like physical sexual intercourse, but sex can also be subtle. It can also pertain to wanting power or prestige or want to be worshipped. So this is also an expression of a sexual desire. So sexual desire can manifest in many ways, and this is a personification of it. And this sexual desire and all of this enjoyment mentality is actually ignorance of who we are and how all this that we actually desire will never bring us happiness. So what King Puranjana here is doing, he says like to this girl, please show me your face. And then the acharyas, when they comment on this verse, they say that by telling to the girl to show us her face, to him actually, her face, he's actually calling her to show him all the nature of avidya. So that is what Srila Prabhupada says here in the purport. He says that Puranjana thus wishes to see the various features that make avidya attractive. And that is something that will be described, like how he lived and what he did and so on. And how the living entity actually enjoys. And then how the living entity enjoys without consulting the intelligence or without consulting the scriptures is that it is allegorically described how King Puranjana goes to hunt the animals. He goes to the forest to hunt. And then when he's exhausted, he comes back. So that's actually a personification of a living entity who enjoys in this world and then gets slapped a lot because there is actually no enjoyment. There will always be some suffering. So therefore the living entity after a while usually is exhausted by the suffering or by some things that are not happening in the way the living entity wants. So therefore the living entity then starts to inquire about maybe this world is not all in all, maybe there is something higher, and that's how actually we start to inquire about the transcendence. And they start with this inquiring about the transcendence starts with simple questions like, who am I? What am I doing here? What is this material world? Why is it functioning the way it's functioning? Is there a God, or is everything made of matter? So we can see that all these questions, the whole world is acting upon these questions. The whole material science is based actually on these questions, but the answers are not correct because they believe that everything comes from matter, or even if they believe that there is some kind of a consciousness in the universe, they usually think that they are the ones who can control it. And indirectly, they again think that they're gods. So, I mean, for me, it's quite interesting because I was reading all those books about, I don't know, controlling the mind, mindfulness, positive thinking, and it's all nice and it's helpful, and of course we can use it. We can use everything in Krishna consciousness. But if someone is not using it in Krishna consciousness, then his way of thinking is actually that he thinks that he can control by his thoughts the universe, and then the universe will respond in a certain way. And sometimes it happens, of course, but that's just karma. It's similar as to a person who is, I don't know, who wants to be successful in his business, and then he or she performs certain activities, and then he gets a good result. But it's just because of the karma of the living entity, and like there is no benefit in it. So, as the Bhagavad Gita says, then we are all born in ignorance, and that's what Krishna confirms, and we read that in the purport of Bhagavad Gita 7:27, where he says that all living entities are born into delusion, overcome by dualities of desire and hate. So I had some points that I wanted to make regarding what was said in this purport. So just give me a second to go through my notes. So first, I wanted to emphasize what we are learning from the story of Puranjana. So we are learning how we are actually encaged. And when we read all this story in a way, especially if we are at the beginning of spiritual life, and even if we are not, we can also relate to it. But mostly, I remember when I was reading Srimad Bhagavatam at the first time, I was just like, wow, this description is so far out, because it really is in that way, that we are chasing dreams and desires that will never be fulfilled, and we are suffering all the time, and and this world is a little bit crazy. So there is no enjoyment, definitely. You can just read the newspapers, and that's like enough to see how this is definitely not a place to stay. But we don't know where to go, so therefore we need this knowledge to tell us like that we are actually spiritual souls, and there is a spiritual world which is there, and we belong there, and we should go there. So yeah, and what this story also describes is like, it shows us like if we want to take the path of material enjoyment, it will show us what will happen. So the whole story of King Puranjana is that he will not be successful in fulfilling all his material desires, and therefore in the end he will get purified. He will even meet the super soul who is actually standing next to him, and who will then explain to him who he actually is. And we will also see through the story of King Puranjana the evidence of reincarnation, because he will, after he leaves his body as a king, he will be born as a woman, and so on the story will go. So we will see like what are the consequences of being attached, for example, to a woman. So in the same sense, if a woman is attached to a man, she will also gain a man's body, which is good actually according to the karma for a woman, because a man's body has more facilities for spiritual advancement than the woman's, even though there are of course exceptions, but mostly that is so. So in a sense, in the material world, it is good for a woman actually to be attached to a man. It's better than a man to be attached to a woman, because if a man is attached to a woman, then spiritually he degrades himself. And I mean, it doesn't have to mean that he or she will be degraded. He can have a woman's body like King Puranjana, but then he will have, I don't know, good karma, so that he will be born under the circumstances in which the person can advance. But even in my own experience, I'm not saying this from the Shastras, but I can see sometimes that for me, some things are more difficult than for a man. So, but that doesn't mean that a woman cannot advance in spiritual knowledge and attain perfection, become a pure devotee in the most elevated states of Krishna consciousness. So it doesn't depend on the body, but there are laws of material nature which function in this way, and they are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, and then I wanted to just remind you of who are actually the persons who are in ignorance. I mean, we all are, as we said. But in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes them more particularly when he talks about who are the persons who approach him for shelter and who are the persons who never approach him. So the persons who approach him are also in ignorance in a way, but they have this motivation to get closer to God, either because they want to be free from distress, they want to achieve certain wealth, or they want to, or they are just inquisitive, or they really want to know the absolute truth. But they're also under a certain covering of avidya, and these persons Krishna considers very elevated, and they're all good souls because they approach him, and therefore they are put on the path of spiritual realization, and they will achieve in time success, and Krishna will purify them, whether someone has material desires or has no material desires. If a person is engaged in devotional service, he will definitely achieve success. And and therefore Krishna also mentions in the Bhagavad Gita the persons who are under this illusion totally and who never approach him, and who he actually in a way ignores because they don't want to surrender unto him. So these are mudas who are considered to be grossly foolish. They want to enjoy the fruits of their labor by themselves. The typical example of the beast of burden, they are called the beast of burden, is an ass, because he carries the burden for his master and he doesn't know actually for whom he is working, but he's still working, and actually all the time he suffers. And he doesn't understand what is karma or action, and he doesn't understand that all the activities that he should perform in his life is actually, he should perform it as a yagya or sacrifice for Vishnu. And that's something that Bhagavad Gita talks about when Krishna describes karma yoga, that we can actually perform our activities, but we can perform them for Krishna, and therefore these activities are no longer fruitive activities, they fall into the devotional service and they purify us. So I was thinking how the most of the people today are considered to be a working class, right? Only, I forgot. I didn't have time to go into details, but I know that the majority of people in the world are considered to be a working class. Then a very small minority is someone who is rich and who can enjoy without working. I think it's like 1 or 2 or 3% of the population in the world that has such wealth. And there are, of course, people who are in agriculture and so on, but they're also becoming a minority because everything is bought by the big companies and factories and so on. So my point is that the majority of people, unfortunately, are mudas because they work so hard. And I'm fortunate not to work somehow by an arrangement of Krishna. And I think I stopped working in 2014. Before that I worked, and I worked all the time. Like in high school I also had summer jobs, and then I was studying and working, and then after college you have to work. I was working in a law firm, and I had to work like 10 hours a day, and sometimes I would work until 2 a.m. because my boss said so and I had to listen to him. And I was all the time thinking like, oh my God, what a waste of life. I mean, because I don't want to do this. I mean, I am interested in what I'm doing, but I don't want my life to be work. Like, it's just work. You get money and then let's do some stuff that you're really interested in. But people don't do that. They don't even enjoy. And I mean, I look at my husband in the sense that because he works, he's lucky because he's a devotee. So for him it's not so, and Krishna takes care of him and he likes his job. It was also an arrangement. But people today, when I look at them, what they do, they just work all the time, and then they get like maybe 4 weeks of holidays and then they can enjoy, but maybe they don't have money to enjoy, and maybe they don't have time to enjoy, and so on. So in that sense, like, there's no use of the work in the sense that it will bring you enjoyment. You can see that it will not. Yeah. And one more point that is said about this working class who are considered as mudas or donkeys or asses, they never have time for spiritual inquiries or for gaining knowledge. And it's not like they don't want to, it's just the habit of doing everything very quickly. And whoever went to, this is often mentioned, that whoever went on book distribution, like, they're always in a hurry, they never have time, you cannot stop them, and so on, they're nervous. So in a sense, that's how the world functions, and this is an example of how people are acting in this way because they're under the influence of avidya, or ignorance. And then the second person is called Naradama, and those are considered to be the lowest of mankind. Nara means human being, and Adama means the lowest. So what does that mean? Again, it pertains to almost everyone in this world. So according to the scriptures, so the Srimad Bhagavatam mentions how there is 8,400,000 species of life, and out of them 400,000 are considered to be human species. And some of these species are considered to be civilized. So the civilized human beings are those who have regulative principles of social, political, and religious life. Those who are socially and politically developed, but who have no religious principles, must be considered Naradamas. So actually, people who, societies in which there are no religious principles by which people live are considered not to be civilized, actually. So that's quite interesting, because the Western world considers itself to be very civilized, and everyone else is not civilized. And I'm not going now into the judgment of what is right or what is wrong. I'm just saying about the commentaries, and don't know in detail like certain religions. But for example, if you go into the Islamic states, they live in a certain way according to their religious principles, and in a way they're a little bit more civilized than the Westerners, but the Westerners think that they're the ones who are more civilized than the Muslims, for example, because they think that their way of life is very conservative, very limiting, and so on. So it depends on the perspective, but actually the main Western world is non-civilized, not the ones who are actually religious, and that's what the scriptures say. And 90% of the population of the world is considered to be Naradamas. And the typical example of such personalities are Jaga and Madai. So, and I will also explain why. Because in a way, they came from a civilized society. So it's quite weird how someone who was a Brahmana, because they came from Brahmana families, fell so lowly. But they were, they also were like that, and they were given as an example of actually Naradamas. And according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Baladev Vidyabhushana, they say that Adamas, these Naradamas, are considered as people who became civilized human beings. For example, they were born in Brahmana families, but and they were born in families which were practicing devotional service for some, and they were practicing devotional service for sometimes themselves. But later, they decided that devotional practices are impractical for achieving their aims in life, and thus they whimsically discard the devotional service. And therefore, they are considered Adama Adama, or fallen because they have rejected devotional service. Yeah. So this is also considered an Adama person. The next one is called Mayaya Parita Janaha, the deluded speculators. Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai, Shishigor Nitai Ki Jai. So when Srila Prabhupada explains who they are, he says that these are like philosophers, poets, scientists, and all these people who actually have intelligence, but the intelligence was stolen by ignorance or avidya. And because they were illusioned in this way, they are disobeying Lord. And what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Baladev Vidyabhushana, they include in this category all the Mayavadis and impersonalists, because it includes people who actually, they know the Vedic scriptures and they have read it, and they maybe even had a guru and received the knowledge, but they have a totally misconception and the wrong interpretation of it. And in that sense, they're also, so their intelligence was stolen by avidya or ignorance, illusion, because they do not have the right conclusion, the right knowledge. And the fourth persons are Asuram Bhava Mashrita, or those of demonic principles. This class is openly atheistic, so these are asuras, like people who totally reject God. And and also Mayavadis and impersonalists are sometimes considered to be like them. So I just wanted to repeat it again from the Bhagavad Gita and give an example of who are actually the people who are considered to be in ignorance or avidya. And King Puranjana here is now smiling to the woman who is a personified intelligence and telling her, like, I want to see your face, and therefore please show me the various features that make avidya attractive. So he actually wants to live in the world and to see all those things and to experience all those things that all these four categories of people who never approach the Lord actually want, and how they live. So he's totally going in that direction. And as I mentioned, and this is where I will, I think, finish, I just wanted to mention how the avidya, as I said, we are put into ignorance in order to actually be in this world, because we have to be in ignorance in order to live a conditioned life. But we live a conditioned life because we chose it, in a way. We rebelled against the Lord, and in a way, Krishna is fulfilling our desires. And what is also explained here, and what I have mentioned, is how the biggest ignorance, or the thing that creates the most ignorance in our lives, because it makes us believe that this conditioned life is all in all, is the sex life. So Srila Prabhupada said that this kind of speech that King Puranjana is speaking here is typical for a living entity attracted by the opposite sex. And in this way, a living entity is attracted by the illusory energy. And I just wanted to share a story which I think is very nice, and which actually gives us knowledge about that this body is actually not what we should be attracted to. And this story is a story called the story of liquid beauty. Maybe all of you heard about it. I'm not saying this that, I mean, the body is given to us. It's a vehicle of the Lord, and we can use it for the service of Krishna. And sex life comes from God. So Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that he is sex according to the religious principles. So if we use everything that is given in the world in a proper way, then it can be good. We can, I don't know, if someone really wants to have a family, they can raise Krishna conscious children, and in that sense benefit those souls who come into this world so that they can have knowledge of Krishna, so that they can have the highest benefit, and automatically the parents get this benefit. So this is not against relationships. It is just like to see in the end that what we are attracted to is not we should not be attracted to the body, because the body is what we will see in this story. And also we should go deeper, and there is nothing wrong with having a relationship with other person, because it is natural for the soul to want to have a relationship with others, to want to express emotions, thoughts, and so on. So in that sense it's quite normal. So I will tell the story about liquid beauty. So once upon a time there was a prince, some say a rich boy, so there are many varieties of the story, and he met a very beautiful girl. So he visited her house to see her, but she was very chaste. The prince wanted to marry this beautiful girl, but she didn't want to marry him. So she said to him, "You want to marry me, you are attracted by my beauty, so I will distill my beauty in the next 10 days. So the prince agreed. The beautiful girl said, "If you still want to take me as your wife, then you can take me." Or some stories, they just said that she said, like, come back in 10 days. She just tested him without telling him that she will, as it is said here, that she will distill her beauty. So the prince replied, "All right, that's fine. I'll come back in 10 days, and certainly I'll take you as my wife, my beautiful young maiden." As soon as he left, the beautiful young girl started to take very strong purgatives, which is a medicine which causes her to vomit or pass stool. So she kept all the vomit and stool in a big pot. She didn't eat anything. She was simply passing stool and vomiting. So within 10 days, her whole beautiful body was destroyed. She was a gray color. She was very skinny, very weak. You couldn't recognize her as the same person. After 10 days, the prince came back to visit the beautiful young girl. She opened the door for him. When the prince saw her, he said, "I have come to see one very beautiful lady who am I about to marry." So the girl said, "I'm that beautiful young lady." He replied, "No, it's not true. How could it be possible?" She said, "Yes, I'm that beautiful young lady. I have distilled my beauty. Come and see it." She took the prince to the place where she was keeping the big pot containing all of her stool, vomit, and urine. And she said, "Here is my beauty." So that is why this story is called the liquid beauty, and it actually teaches us not to be like King Puranjana and be attracted to the external features of something that is attractive to us. So whether it's a woman for a man or a man for a woman, don't be actually superficial. That's the point of the story. And go a little bit deeper and understand who you are, who this person is, and what you can actually do together. So in that sense, it also talks about that this body is temporary, and it also describes what it is made of. So basically, what we are attracted to is so very nice. I mean, we don't see it because of the skin that covers the body, and then it makes the body look beautiful. But this is what it is. And I think that people maybe face it the most when they start to get old, or they start to be diseased, and then they see actually that this body is not all in all. So there are many points that can be said regarding this purport, but this is what I wanted to share. So maybe if someone has some comments or realizations or questions, you're more than welcome to share.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Since we have a few minutes, I was just, as Nanda Kumar Prabhu would say, let's explore a bit. You were speaking in the end now about this illusory beauty, and that if we base the relationship on that external beauty, like this story tells, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we know that without that beauty, nobody will enter maybe some very, very pious souls in India who have an arranged marriage, they will just follow, and even they're not attracted externally. But usually what I heard is there has to be some attraction.
Of course.
And yeah, maybe you can say something about this, and maybe also about how, because we know time also will eventually destroy that, and one is forced to detach from the external. At the same time, in the Vedic culture, we know that doesn't mean that if the external is not there anymore, but you took up that responsibility of entering a relationship, then you have a duty to perform. Yeah, maybe you can say something about this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good example of how we should not superficially approach people, even though, as you said, that attraction is needed for someone to be in a relationship. And actually, I think that all people can be attractive in a certain way, and this is also something that is described in this purport, where Srila Prabhupada says that when a man and a woman is attracted by the opposite sex, it does not matter whether the opposite sex is beautiful or not. So in a way, maybe for someone is attractive, for someone he or she is not, and that's a matter of personal taste. But it's just the point of this, don't be superficial and base everything on the externals. And the externals don't have to be just, I don't know, the physical look, but maybe even the way someone is behaving, what is a certain person doing, and so on, because we have certain preferences. But actually, we should go deeper into seeing what we are. So that's like a first step in maybe understanding what we are doing with the other person. And the other is that in a way we have to understand, and we are understanding it through the devotional service, that this body will perish. And also it allows us to maybe form deeper relationships which are not based just on, I don't know, physical looks, if we're talking about that, because everyone will get old. Or even they don't have to get old. I don't know, there can be someone who is very beautiful and young and this person gets sick, so the person cannot act in a certain way, and therefore you have, like you said, this duty or obligation because you gave a vow, to someone that you will live with this person and take care of this person. And this duties actually purifies us. That's the whole point of Varnashram Dharma, right? That we have certain roles that purify us. So it's not an easy, you cannot have an easy answer to this question. There are certain principles that are described in the Shastras and that we should try to follow, but I also think that everything is very individual. Like you have principles that you follow, but the circumstances in life are totally individual to a certain person, and that some person may apply certain things and some person may not. So, and there are many details regarding that. Even if you talk about the role of a woman and a man, according to the Vedic society, there is much more to it. These are certain principles that are described in Srimad Bhagavatam, but in the end, everyone is individual. All men, they have individual characteristics and personality, and so do the women, So in that sense, you cannot put everything in the same box. That's how I see it. But these are certain stories and certain principles that help us actually understand in the end what we are, and that we are spirit souls, and that our relationship is actually the relationship. We should be happy in a relationship with God, in our service with God, and so on. And we can look at our family as servants of God, and we can take care of them in that sense. So it is described in the scriptures how a husband can see a wife as a servant of Krishna, and in that sense he serves her and helps her to advance in her spiritual path and to perform the activities to Krishna. In the same sense, the woman can also see a man. Of course, it is said that the man is a guru and a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's also a das, a servant of Krishna. So therefore, this vision has to be there, and therefore they help each other to progress spiritually on this path. And also, the parents can see the children as, we know that some of them describe them as Vaikuntha children who are very special, because it is said that the demigods are standing in a row to get birth on earth, because this is the place where they can actually make the most advancement in spiritual life, and therefore they come into pious families, for instance, the families of devotees. And therefore we have again the scriptures who give principles, and then we see them as someone to whom we can, whose spiritual life we can facilitate in a way, like we can help them. So this is the vision that we should have. But here it is described like how the soul, when born in ignorance, has a total different vision. And therefore Narada Muni gives his story just to cut the vision of King Pa. He wants to destroy his vision of enjoyment and life that he imagines by this story, and then he gives all these examples. Maybe I said even more that you asked, but sorry. Yeah. Okay, so if you have nothing else to say or share, thank you very much for your attention. And Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. But not in the same sense, because here in the story it will be described even later that this king will tell to Narada Muni, but I really don't understand this story. I say it's an allegory, and he will explain it to me. And then he said that this one represents intelligence, and sometimes you can just read the verses and then you do a verse interpret, so you can have the whole story. Basically, so he is this description of the body. He's a soul, and there is intelligence, and there are the senses, and object of the senses. So the story